Brexit. What are we waiting for?
We agree that our future economic partnership should provide for solutions to the unique circumstances in Northern Ireland in the long term. And while we are both committed to ensuring that this future relationship is in place by the end of the implementation period, we accept that there is a chance that there may be a gap between the two. This is what creates the need for a backstop to ensure that if such a temporary gap were ever to arise, there would be no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland, or indeed anything that would threaten the integrity of our precious union. So this backstop is intended to be an insurance policy for people of Northern Ireland and Ireland. The House of Commons set out its view when agreeing unanimously Part 6, Section 55 of the Taxation Cross-Border Trade Act on a single United Kingdom customs territory. This states, quote, "It shall be unlawful for Her Majesty's Government to enter into arrangements under which Northern Ireland forms part of a separate customs territory to Great Britain." I need to be able to look the British people in the eye and say this backstop is a temporary solution. People are rightly concerned that what is only meant to be temporary could become a permanent limbo, with no new relationship between the UK and the EU ever agreed. I'm clear we are not going to be trapped permanently in a single customs territory, unable to do meaningful trade deals. So it must be the case, first, that the backstop should not need to come into force, second, that if it does, it must be temporary, and third, while I do not believe this will be the case, if the EU were not to cooperate on our future relationship, we must be able to ensure that we cannot be kept in this backstop arrangement indefinitely.
There is, therefore, no unilateral right for either party to terminate this arrangement. This means that if no superseding agreement can be reached within the implementation period, the protocol would be activated, and in international law would subsist even if negotiations had broken down.
To get May's deal through Parliament, May is set to offer a double lock to ensure the Irish backstop cannot last longer than 12 months, so that her deal can be approved by Parliament. The backstop, which has been demanded by Brussels and Dublin, is designed to prevent the emergence of a hard border on the island of Ireland if trade talks falter.
The deal we've negotiated is a deal that honours the referendum, it honours the result of the referendum, and it's the best deal available. Indeed, it's the only deal available. And the backstop, which is the issue that Parliament has raised, the backstop is a necessary guarantee for the people of Northern Ireland. And whatever outcome you want, whatever relationship you want with Europe in the future, there's no deal available that doesn't have a backstop within it. But we don't want the backstop to be used, and if it is, we want to be certain that it is only temporary.
But critics believe it could leave the UK trapped indefinitely in a form of customs union, which prevents us negotiating trade deals with non-EU countries.
Sounds like a great deal for the EU, and I think we have to do this. I think we have to take a look at seriously whether or not the UK is allowed to trade, because, you know, right now, if you look at the deal, they may not be able to trade with us, and that wouldn't be a good thing. I don't think they meant that. I don't think that the Prime Minister meant that, and hopefully she'll be able to do something about that. But right now, as the deal stands, they may not be able to trade with the US, and I don't think they want that at all. That would be a very big negative for the deal.
So instead of changing the withdrawal agreement itself, which the EU wouldn't allow, Number 10 officials are working on an amendment to the vote on a deal later this month. The amendment would give Parliament the right to serve notice of an intention, and only a notice of intention, to quit the backstop after 12 months if Europe fails to agree a trade deal with the UK. The Vienna Convention does give the UK the right to withdraw from international treaties, but this is only a notice of intention to quit the backstop, not a legally binding change to the withdrawal agreement.
The UK could and should have negotiated an exit mechanism to the controversial Irish backstop. That's according to the former Brexit Secretary Dominic Raab, it is the issue that could sink Theresa May's deal in the House of Commons.
So at the same time, May is trying to prove to MPs in Parliament that a deal would be agreed in 12 months by getting the EU to write a written guarantee, none of which is enough for Brexiteers and the DUP because both solutions involve MPs accepting the legally binding withdrawal agreement, which includes the Irish Backstop proposals anyway.
I think what we all need to try to do is to find some common ground between us, but I think what that will need is an amendment to the draft withdrawal agreement. It's removal of this so-called Northern Ireland backstop. It's not needed. You know, all sides say that we can keep the border invisible and free-flowing. So we do not need this backstop, which could potentially lock us permanently into an arrangement where we're complying with many EU rules without having a vote on them. I think it's important for the government to continue to engage, to continue to work with our European neighbours to see if we can persuade them to amend that withdrawal treaty. But if the EU are adamant that not one word of that text can be changed, then we need to be prepared to leave without a withdrawal agreement.
May has taken control of no deal planning too. But why? Why not just have the vote now? It seems fear of political chaos is keeping May and the country in stalemate right now.
You say short-term risk, but we've had some pretty alarming predictions, haven't we? You know, baby formula milk, for example, needing to be stockpiled, medicines struggling to get through those ports at Dover, 6 months of disruption. I mean, this is more than just risk.
Well, I scrutinised all of those papers, and frankly, I can say now as a backbencher that some of those assumptions are just not credible. So, for example, one of the things that the government's no-deal planning suggests is that every lorry coming through will take 10 minutes to check, that there will only be 2 cabins at Calais, and that there will be no attempt by the UK in this worst-case scenario to try and mitigate the risks. Well, that's not a reasonable worst-case assumption. That's a sort of kamikaze worst-case assumption. Of course, we can do it quicker than 10 minutes a lorry. They do 5 minutes a lorry in Switzerland, and of course, we will try and divert some of that flow if the French take a particularly punitive approach to Zeebrugge, to Rotterdam, and some of those other ports. And I don't think those assumptions and those forecasts that have come out from the government recently are remotely credible. And I said that to the officials when I was Secretary of State.
What was their response?
Well, they didn't have a very good one on the facts. I mean, it's not about civil servants versus politicians. I've just asked the question, for example, the French authorities say that they can check a lorry in 2 minutes. So why are we saying that it would take 10 minutes a lorry to check? Why are we defying what the French authorities themselves say they would do? Why are we not also taking into account the things that we can do to mitigate some of that damage and that disruption to flow? So I'm not saying that there wouldn't be some risk and some disruption. There would, but it's far more manageable than is being suggested. And I think just as we saw, take Paul Krugman, former Nobel economist, and no fan of Brexit. He said that the Bank of England forecasts were not serious, and they felt like they were politically motivated. I think there's a lot of this going on, and I don't think the British public are going to be cowed by Project Fear Mark 2.
But we all know that the withdrawal agreement will not pass through Parliament as it currently is, and it has to pass through Parliament. But do you agree with me? Join in the debate below and subscribe.